You know how sometimes you think your neighborhood is safe, quiet, just the kind of place where nothing out of the ordinary ever happens? That was me, until one sunny Tuesday morning when my 86-year-old granddad, Harold, opened his front door expecting a small package from one of those TV shopping channels he loves. Instead, two strangers in pastel polo shirts barged onto his porch waving clipboards like weapons, shouting something about urgent hedge compliance. Before he could even process what they were saying, one of them shoved him so hard he fell backwards, clutching the cage of his canary. He landed awkwardly, and his arm, it bent in a way no arm should bend. I was 3 days out from finishing a stint with the Army Reserve when my phone rang. My mom's voice was shaky. She told me Granddad was in the hospital with a broken arm and a bruised hip. She said some kind of neighborhood officers were involved. I knew our street didn't have an HOA. That was one of the reasons Harold moved to Willow Creek in the first place. No one telling you what shade your mailbox should be, no one measuring your grass with a ruler. So who the hell were these people? The moment I hung up, something in me shifted. I wasn't just visiting my hometown anymore. I was on a mission. I drove straight to Granddad's place, walked past his little bird feeders swinging in the breeze, and sat down at his kitchen table. I pulled out my laptop, my headset, and a notebook. If these people thought they could intimidate an old man just because he lived alone, they'd picked the wrong family to mess with. Harold told me they called themselves the Willow Creek Standards Committee, led by a woman named Marlene Yates, a self-appointed property guardian with a permanent scowl and an obsession with order. She had a handful of loyal followers, all retirees with too much time on their hands and, apparently, no moral compass. There was even a guy named Rick who didn't live anywhere near here, but liked to patrol the streets in his free time. They had homemade badges, a golf cart they decorated with a vinyl logo, and a set of compliance notices they printed at the local office supply store. I started with the doorbell camera footage. It was gold. The video showed the two men in matching powder blue polos marching up to Harold's porch, shouting about some mandatory hedge trimming deadline. He stood there, confused, holding his canary's cage, trying to make sense of it. One of them stepped forward, aggressive, clipboard raised like he was about to deliver a final warning. Harold stepped back, hand on the door, clearly wanted to end the conversation. That's when the second man shoved past him. My granddad fell. The cage hit the porch with a clang, and the sickening sound of bones snapping filled the audio. They didn't help him up. They didn't even check. They just dropped an orange violation notice on the step and walked away. I made multiple copies of that footage on USB in the cloud, printed stills. Then I went digging. Marlene had a Facebook page that was practically a confession booth. Photos of her team posing in front of their golf cart. Captions bragging about restoring dignity to the neighborhood. A Pinterest board dedicated to acceptable lawn decor that outlawed anything remotely whimsical. Post after post about her successful enforcement missions. The more I looked, the more victims I found. There was Mrs. Delgado, fined for having a mailbox that was too cream, not beige. Mr. Fisher, told his vegetable patch was agricultural blight. The Monroe family, threatened with action because their wind chimes posed a noise hazard, even though they hadn't made a sound in years. People were scared or just too worn down to fight back. Many were elderly, living alone, or simply unaware they had the right to say no. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my granddad. This was about a small group of people terrorizing an entire neighborhood under the guise of standards. I filed police reports, assault, battery, criminal impersonation. Then I called the state attorney general's office. The woman on the other end actually laughed when I described the mobile enforcement unit as a golf cart with a label maker. But she quickly got serious when I mentioned an elderly man's broken arm. She told me they took cases of impersonating officials, especially when it led to physical harm, very seriously. But I wasn't done. I wanted to hit them where it hurt, their pride. I set up a fake email account, posing as a regional zoning director. I designed a polished invitation to something called the Greater Metro Compliance Summit, complete with a professional agenda. Breakout sessions like maximizing resident cooperation and advanced enforcement tactics. I even made a fake registration website with a login page. Within an hour of receiving the email, Marlene replied enthusiastically, saying she'd be bringing her entire team. She probably thought this was her big moment, networking with other professionals. The day of the summit, I parked across from the municipal center with a telephoto lens. At 9:02 a.m., a spotless white golf cart rolled up. Marlene stepped out in a crisp navy pantsuit, her crew trailing behind in matching polos, each with a fresh badge that read conference delegate. They walked in like royalty, and that's when Deputy Lane and two other officers stepped forward. "Are you Marlene Yates?" the deputy asked. "Yes, that's me," she said, smiling like she was about to be honored. Instead, he handed her a cease and desist order and a criminal summons. One by one, her team got the same treatment. The look on her face was priceless, like a fish gasping for air. Word spread fast. The city attorney declared the Willow Creek Standards Committee an illegal entity. Every laminated badge was seized. The golf cart was impounded for vehicular harassment, a term I'd never heard until that day. The label maker? Taken as evidence. And now that the fear had broken, people started talking. Stories poured out. Marlene trespassing into backyards at night, measuring lawns by flashlight, smashing a bird bath she deemed unsafe, chopping down rose bushes she claimed violated an imaginary height rule. One neighbor had video of Rick tossing garden gnomes into a truck while shouting about aesthetic violations. Investigators found even more. Marlene had been collecting fines for years, over $20,000, through a P.O. box, all from residents who thought they were paying legitimate fees. That added mail fraud and elder financial abuse to her growing list of charges. Her trial was short. The prosecution had it all. Harold's x-rays, the doorbell footage, dozens of witnesses. Mrs. Delgado broke down describing how Marlene made her afraid to garden in her own yard. Marlene's lawyer tried to paint her as a misguided do-gooder, claiming she thought she was protecting property values. But when the jury saw the video of my granddad's fall, their faces hardened. She was found guilty: assault causing bodily harm to an elderly person, criminal impersonation, fraud, harassment, trespassing. She got 3 years in state prison, 2 more for impersonation to run concurrently, $50,000 in restitution split among the victims, and a permanent restraining order keeping her 500 feet away from any Willow Creek resident. Her real estate license was revoked on the spot. As the judge read the sentence, her face went from red to pale to this weird purplish hue. Then she stood up and started yelling about how we'd all regret this, how the neighborhood would descend into chaos without her. The bailiff had to physically guide her out while she ranted about the coming collapse of curb appeal. When it was all over, Harold and I sat on his porch, sipping sweet tea. He looked at me with that sly little grin and said, "You didn't just get even, kid, you cleaned house." I still walk past that porch sometimes, and the new bird feeder swinging there. It's brighter now, less fear in the air. And every time I see a golf cart, I can't help but smile. What about you? Have you ever seen someone take community rules way too far? Would you have gone as far as I did? Or do you think there's a line when revenge becomes too much? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear where you stand on this.